outside. I'm back in my car. So I thought I'd do kind of a little history and state of where I'm at with my writing right now, because this is going to be kind of a writing account, record of my writing journey. So I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of where I'm at and where I've been in terms of writing. So I've always been writing, like, you know, my entire life and to some extent, but as far as like creative writing for a novel or projects that I've like thought about pursuing professionally, I really started that after I graduated college. I started writing a story, and it's kind of funny because I thought I was like making up a job for this story, and come to find out it actually exists. So I really want to like research when they started having this specific job, because I remember researching it at the time and it not existing. So I'm very curious about it. But that story is about a group of people tasked with going through lost luggage to figure out who the owners are and return those lost items to the owners. A few months ago we were watching TV, and there's a show on History Channel or Nat Geo about literally that, people doing that job at the Denver airport. Actually good, because maybe I could use that as some research when I eventually return to that project, because I did get a lot done on that, but I wanted there to be like 4 concurrent narratives happening with these 4 people. I've mostly finished one, but it really needs some work on like plot and structure for sure, and stuff like that. But that story, I actually did enter into a writing contest here in Colorado, and I won 3rd place. It made me feel a little bit more confident in my writing, like I could do it. But that was, I think, the end or halfway through my first year in my editing job. And so then like at the end of my 2nd year in that job is when I switched to shelter medicine. I took a really long break from writing because I was focusing on learning, vet med, animal welfare, everything having to do with that, because there is so much to learn and you need to really know what you're doing because it's like life or death. Honestly, I didn't feel pulled to it again until about 2023. I was working at a shelter in Arizona, and I just kind of sat down and started writing. And what came out was this fantasy story that I had started it, like an idea about it, back when I started writing the airport story, and it was going to be like a twist on a fairy tale. I think that was in the back of my mind, but I just started writing something totally different, and I was like, wait, I did have this idea for this fantasy story, this fairy tale, and maybe I could like incorporate that into this. And I didn't really know where it was going. The context, I was like never a fantasy person. I didn't read any fantasy growing up. I rejected almost everything fantasy because I just really didn't feel drawn by it at the time. Like growing up when I was younger, I read a lot of historical fiction. Fantasy was really not in my wheelhouse as far as reading or let alone writing it. I didn't really get into fantasy until I met my husband. It was actually a couple years after, like I think it was the year after we got married, I like read Harry Potter for the first time. So that kind of got me in there. I read Lord of the Rings, which is his all-time favorite, franchise story of all time. I love that, and The Hobbit. I started with The Hobbit, and so that really kind of opened that world a little bit to me. And then we got into playing D&D with my brother-in-law, and that really like opened the floodgates as far as like creativity and what could be a world and the rules of that world and magic and different characters and their backstories and what drives people and stuff like that. So it really opened my mind to a lot more character development and a different way to explore like certain themes. A big theme in mine is going to be like reconciling evil that we see in the world. Like, how did this person get that way? What made them that way? Were they born that way? Were they influenced throughout their life? Is it salvageable? Are they savable? Can they change? Can people change after so many years of being that same way? And what could make them change? So those are all like kind of overarching questions that I'm gonna try and explore in this. At that time I was working a 4/10 shift and I didn't have anything else going on, so every day I had off I would go to a coffee shop and I would just write and see what happened, and I had ideas, kind of went down different avenues and then pulled back from them, trying to figure out what this story was gonna be. Once I left my job, it's insane how much everything like snapped into focus when I didn't have so many extraneous things going on. And that's not to say you can't write with a lot of things going on. I still have a lot going on in my life, but I don't have mostly the stress and the tension from my job that I was experiencing. That was really like taking up a lot of my brain power. I literally had no bandwidth for much creativity, and I was doing a lot of crocheting and knitting because it doesn't really take a lot, but I can still feel like I'm making something and being creative. But I didn't really have any bandwidth for like making progress in my writing. And I really tried really hard to work that into my schedule, but I was just so drained that I like couldn't really make a dent. And so when I left, it was like, okay, I'm gonna really focus on this, and things just started to like kind of come together. I want to write a fantasy story. I want it to be a series, at least a trilogy, but maybe more. And it is going to be kind of a fairy tale retelling, but it's influenced by a lot of things. So I don't know if I could just tell you it's a Rapunzel retelling, because that's where the idea started like over 10 years ago. It's going to be kind of a long spanning quest in a way. I can't decide if the main characters are going to be enemies to lovers or not. I hate to say that, yes, my main characters are going to start out as teenagers, but I did really kind of need them to start out, actually in the beginning of the book they start out as 8 years old, 8 and 9, so it is going to start from like kind of the very beginning, where they were in their life, and then how everything changes and they get together and they go on this quest and everything. So right now I am about halfway through the first book, really setting down the plot and how it's going to work. I've rewritten the full draft to really find those holes and make sure I'm not leaving any glaring ones, at least to my mind. I haven't had anything beta read yet or anything read by anyone else, so I'm sure that's gonna show more holes and things that need to be fixed. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna work in the lore and the myth that's gonna come into play throughout the story. The fire is lit not just to like finish this book because I'm excited to, you know, go on with the you know, the critique, the peer review, the critique process, the editing process, and like starting to query. Part of, you know, stuff I also do is that I'm researching other potential comp titles. I'm researching potential agents and agencies that I want to query, looking at different publishers that I might aspire to. Now I can say like I'm a full-time writer, whether I'm writing this or I'm writing for this job I'm gonna start part-time. Like, I'm a writer, and that's what I always wanted to be, was a full-time writer.